Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll shut down some microphones. Okay, we should be good. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the first meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy. Yesterday, we had a very intense 4-hour dialogue that was attended by around 75 people on the online conference call system and a few dozens of people on the different social media channels. So I get the opportunity to say good morning also for those of you who are following the work of the Council on Facebook and YouTube. So it was a great exercise of collective political intelligence in the sense that beside bringing our top, please can I ask you to, yes, sorry. So of course, first of all, let's try to speak a bit slowly so that we are sure that we can all understand each other better. I was saying that the thing that we did yesterday was a great example of how people coming from the most different walk of political life and activism and analysis of the European political debate and framework were able to put together their thoughts around participatory democracy as a complementary element of representative democracy and the needs that always been there but had been kind of brought up more strongly due to the coronavirus emergency. We focused, as I said yesterday, on the instruments which of course cannot be treated in isolation. There is an element of the effectiveness of political participatory democracy instruments within the European political space, and also there is always the catch-22 of how the EU institutions are built and work. So this challenge is always there, whatever decision we try to achieve. A great deal of the debate was focused on the also on the conference on the future of Europe in the sense of disappointment that that can become an opportunity for citizens to push for a more strong action, and of course the use of petitions and European Citizen Initiative in a broader sense for having impact on EU policies. The debate yesterday also contained a lot of elements of the actual policies and needs that are needed at this stage. So it's of course very difficult to talk only about the instruments. It's important to have clear in mind the political goals that we want to achieve. A few speakers brought up similar topics, which we can summarize in the element of the control of borders and the freedoms within the EU space, the needs of course, a coordination in the management of the emergencies and the health and the rights to health of the citizens, not only Europeans, of course. And of course, the element of a potential economic crisis and the reforms and the actions needed in terms of economy. Also, the other topics were brought up, which explains also the session of today. So the environmental crisis, the climate change, the need of reforms in the education space. So as we see, everything is tied together and we cannot really isolate the health emergency from the rest. So what's going to happen today? Today we will try to focus on more specifically on what can be done and how. There are a few speeches that are already planned. So we will start with Marco Cappato and Lorenzo Milanese, who will offer some guidelines in terms of where to focus our attention in terms of proposals. As I already mentioned the topic, I also asked Pier Virgilio D'Astoli to give us an update on the rule of law element. As some of you might know, there was a European citizen initiative, on the respect of the rule of law in the European Union. The request of that European citizen initiative was around monitoring the rule of law with a verifiable and objective manner. I personally believe that this topic is even more important now, where policies of emergencies are gonna kind of become the norm, and therefore monitoring carefully the rule of law is essential. Of course, this strategy needs to change, and Virgilio will update us on that, will give us some perspective, because at the end of the day, that is what keeps every policy together. Lorenzo Mineo will present the draft proposal of a petition to the European Parliament to counter emergencies such as the coronavirus one, which is already being shared in the documents. And then we have Marco Perduca, coordinator of Science for Democracy, who will give us a briefing on the last World Congress for Freedom of Scientific Research, which was held in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia at the end of last month, to offer another element of perspective into the debate. We have two MEPs that are joining us later on. The first one is Eleonora Evi from Movimento 5 Stelle, and the second one is Brando Benifei from Partito Democratico, two Italians. Yesterday, other speakers mentioned they are in contact with other MEPs, so let's use this opportunity. We all know is a first meeting to connect with the elected representative in the European institutions to see what can we do together. Just two things in terms of practice. You can write your names in the chat when you want to talk, and we are getting all the list of speakers. Feel free to bring on your topics. Let's only try to put it in a propositive framework. So whatever we suggest, let's try to imagine also how it could work in the next step of this informal coordination that we're trying to do with the Council on Participatory Democracy. We will also share again the link of the collective notes taking. We have already 25 pages of notes taking. We're probably writing a bit of history of the European Union, so let's keep doing that. It's a precious material that we can build on. Okay, without much further ado, I leave the floor to Marco Cappato and Lorenzo Marsili for some perspectives and introduction on the actual things that can be done beyond using the instruments. Thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, thank you Virginia, and good morning to all. Thank you for being here. The discussion of this morning is methodologically different than the one of yesterday. Yesterday we talked about instruments, and today we should talk a little bit more about policies. But of course there is a relations between the two, and reforming the instrument is also a political proposal. So there is a link between the two discussions. I think that one possible common outcome of this meeting could be to coordinate in using the instruments of European participation and in proposing reform to them, including the issue of knowledge and information. So to reinforce the right of European citizens to be informed about citizens' right and citizen participation. And then every different organization could use those methods to promote its own agenda. But it's also true that if there are issues on which more than one organization and many organizations can be united also on the merit, why not? So this is also an occasion for a more coordinated approach on that. So on one side there will be this petition that Lorenzo will present that has already been circulated. And I think this is an important one because it's a way of trying to have a common response to the coronavirus crisis. So, and could already be a common outcome. Then we still don't know if on the 9th of March, the conference on the future of Europe will, of May, the conference on the future of Europe will start. But I think we could together decide to have an appointment for either for the 8th of May, either for the 9th, if the conference will not happen, in order to maintain an appointment of the discussion on these issues. And I also think that we could foresee a citizen assembly based on sortition to discuss both the future of Europe, but also the coronavirus crisis, not in the short term, but for the medium and long-term proposals. So on the merit, some of the issues on which I think that a proposal could be addressed to the EU are regarding the rule of law and democracy, the environment, the technology, competition and digital right, and welfare and social right, civil freedom, and the benefit of science. I took some notes from some of the Eumans proposals. I would quickly run through them. On the rule of law, the creation of an impartial mechanism of evaluation to verify the application of the European values by all the member states concerning the rule of law. On participatory democracy, the establishment, as I said before, of European Citizen Assembly based on sortition, and the reform of existing instruments with information and investment for their effectiveness. On the strengthening of the role of the European Parliament, the responsibility of the European Parliament and the empowerment of the role of the European Parliament in the process of the reform of the treaties, starting from the conference on the future of Europe and in the decision on the budget. We discussed this yesterday, and I think it's very important. And then also the evaluation of public policy, the establishment of an independent agency for the evaluation of European policy and mandatory national system of evaluation. So this for the rule of law and democracy. On the environment, on climate emergency, a carbon pricing, green fiscal transition, and fostering of the European Green Deal, and also on intensive farming, abolishing funding and incentives, both in a common agricultural policy and in ETS and emission trade schemes. On the technology, competition, and digital rights, the issue of fiscal equity, fair international taxation system against elusion and tax havens, and the right to knowledge, so interoperability of digital platform, file sharing, civic artificial intelligence, open data, and data sovereignty and open access. I think that this issue of artificial intelligence is particularly important to have a European model of investment, not only driven by profit or by surveillance, but by the empowerment of the citizens. On the benefit of science, Marco Perduca will talk about that, so I will not talk about it. On civil freedom, sexual health, reproductive rights, and family planning, cannabis, to lay down a minimum sanctions and guarantee freedom to regulate, and LGBT right on mutual recognition of same-sex couple rights. So these are only some of the issues on which we worked in the past months. The idea is to prepare a kind of a package of petitions to be submitted to some personalities in the world of culture and politics around Europe, so that the conference on the future of Europe can be open when already a kind of a program of a popular initiative is already there, is already on the table. We know perfectly that petitions and the European Citizens Initiative do not carry a mandatory power, and they are a very weak instrument. But if we combine the struggle to propose them with the struggle to obtain the information for the citizens on those proposals, I think that we could draw attention of the European institutions in a moment in which is very important for them, for von der Leyen, for the Commission and the Council, to show that they are able to take up the challenge of this time. So thank you very much, and of course I will listen to all the other proposals, and I hope that we could find a common ground on the method. So each organization has its own priority, but trying to coordinate in reinforcing the instruments of citizen participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco Cappato. Now Lorenzo Marsili for another angle and perspective.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Just very briefly, I said already a lot of things yesterday. In our discussions yesterday, we approached the new level of ambition that the crisis is bringing home to all of us, and the necessity for institutional processes such as that of the Conference on the Future of Europe were it to go ahead to achieve a whole new level of proposal in order to remain relevant in this situation. But something else that the current situation also unveils, and that connects quite directly with our discussion today, is how closely interdependent everything has become globally as well as within the context of the European Union. We know that the lack of functioning health and hygienic standards at a global level, we know that the weakness of the World Health Organization, which is an interesting advisory body but has no power of actually tackling the disastrous lack of health services in large parts of the world. We know that this uneven development of something as important as health and hygiene is a threat not only for those countries that are unfortunate enough not to have a developed health system, but to everyone else as well. We know very clearly that unless we manage to have an upward race to our standards, epidemics such as this will continue growing. And we know that within the European Union, unless we develop a common response to a health crisis such as this one, we're not going to get out of it, because each country is going to lag behind everyone else, and suddenly the whole problem will reappear and start all over again. This is something that we've been knowing for quite some time. Marco mentioned the rule of law. We know that the lack of enforcement of clear standards when it comes to the rule of law or media freedom, for example, in countries like Italy, as well as Hungary, impact on everyone else in the European Union. The lack of, for instance, clear European regulations on the independence of media freedom when Berlusconi was prime minister in Italy, or on the rule of law now that Orban is prime minister in Hungary, increases the level of corruption and the economic dysfunctionality of those countries, which in turn have a negative impact on the remainder of the European Union and specifically of the Eurozone, marking a very close level of interdependence between those elements. So I think this is something that it's worth underscoring as we try and find new framings to advance the kind of issues that Marco was mentioning, which I completely subscribe to. I think the question is how do we make them all the more relevant and urgent vis-a-vis the current crisis, and how do we make them not appear as just a very epiphenomenal issue or campaign, given the disaster that is unfolding ahead of us. Something that perhaps is worth adding to that list, and I subscribe strongly also to the point on tax haven. In fact, tax haven is a very good example of how we can link those demands with the ongoing crisis. There is going to be, as we discussed yesterday, an extraordinary necessity for financial resources to be allocated to the real economy if we are to avoid the greatest global slump since 1939. The evasion of multinational corporations, I think, is something that will be considered yet more scandalous given the present circumstance, especially because I think most people are understanding that while billionaires escape to their bankers in New Zealand, it's doctors and nurses that are protecting them, and perhaps society has to reshuffle its priorities and its allocation of resources from one to the other. One thing that's worth adding perhaps to the list is whether we can do something to directly intervene in what is likely to be the greatest intervention of the state in the economy of recent time as a result of the economic disaster that is about to fall on our heads. We know that the president of France, together with the prime ministers of Spain and Italy, have demanded or are looking into the possibility of activating the ESM, which has 500 billion euros firepower. Whatever the technicalities, we know that there is going to be a lot of money being made available, and that is going to be spent in the coming months in order to try and resuscitate the economic patient. There is maybe a role here to make sure that this money doesn't go to replicate the kind of brown economy that we've been critiquing until now. It's not about building roads and bridges. It's not about propping up unsustainable and polluting industries from the past, but it's precisely developing that vision that some of us used to call the Green New Deal. It can have whatever name, but that vision of an ecological transformation of our production system, investment in research, and all the discussions that also Marco was raising just before me. Maybe there is a need for some organized pressure to make sure that this one in a lifetime allocation of resources from the public purse is going to go in the right direction, and not replicate, for instance, what we've seen with previous packages to boost the economy, even in the United States, where ultimately in 2008, it was more about putting back on track a system that was unsustainable rather than using that occasion to rebuild a new system, which is what we ought to try and achieve with the window of opportunity that might open up in the coming months after the more dramatic part of the crisis is over. Last concrete proposal I have. Yesterday I mentioned a pretty long time frame. I was speaking about 2022 and the possibility of launching an alternative citizens assembly that leads us to the European elections. We had a longer term temporality of analysis. The concrete proposal I want to end on today is that we try to construct, together with other organizations, of course, a large appointment during the German presidency of the EU in autumn in Berlin. It would be a very interesting time, not only because of the German presidency, not only because it's the time when the Conference on the Future of Europe ought to be running, if it does go ahead, in fact, but also autumn might be the time when the full economic impact of this crisis begins to be understood, when the limits of the EU response to it begin to become apparent, and also the time when people might be able to be together again after what is likely to be quite a few months of social measures of containment. And perhaps it's a good time to organize a large-scale social forum, democratic conference, assembly, congress, call it as you will, in the context of that presidency in a central city such as Berlin, and to bring together some of the forces that are meant to shape this new course in the years ahead. That's all for me.
Thank you, Lorenzo, also for giving us a potential place to be in autumn, which in this phase to me is very encouraging. So I like the idea of Berlin. Joking apart, we don't have anyone yet who subscribed to speak. So I will move to the next speaker, who is Lorenzo Mineo, who is gonna present the emergency proposal, let's call it, even though it's emergency for the future of emergency. So I let Lorenzo explain the project. I see that there is also connected Hervé Parmentier, who is from the Centre d'Action Laique, which is one of the organizations who called for this Council on Participatory Democracy. So I'm very happy that we have him here. And the guys from ECIT Foundation as well. Okay, Lorenzo Mineo.
Hello, everybody. I'm just sharing with you the text of the draft petition we wrote. I know that it's already circulated, but in this way you can have it under the eyes. As we said, it's an open text, so it's totally open to your suggestion and proposal, but I will try to resume the main aspect of our petition, and then Virgilio Dassoli will help me introducing the economic aspect. First of all, the petition we wrote is addressing at least three issues. One are the measures that can be activated immediately to address this health crisis. Then we have the economical measures that are useful to address the economic crisis that will probably follow the health one, and it's already happening. And then, of course, longer term measures that can be useful in order to prevent future epidemics and pandemics.
So, Lorenzo, I'm hearing echo. I'm the only one.
You have problems in hearing me?
Oh, I hear an echo. I'm the only one? Okay, I'm the only one. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so coming back to the petition, as I said, the first thing, there are firstly some mechanisms that can be activated right now. The first one concerns the measurement and classification of cases of COVID, of course, of coronavirus. This is very important because nowadays we know that every country is using different criteria to detect cases of coronavirus. And of course, this is affecting data and statistics on the disease. So it's very important also for scientists and researchers to have common criteria on coronavirus. And one thing that the EU could do is to harmonize this criteria. Another thing that the EU should do, but I know that we should rewrote this part of the petition because yesterday something changed. But anyway, the EU should totally activate the European Union mechanism of civil protection for the supply of necessary medical equipment to face this pandemic. We know that indeed yesterday the European Union mechanism of civil protection has been partially activated through the rescEU stockpile, providing a partial supply of medical equipment. Anyway, we should rewrote this part of the petition and see how this rescEU stockpile can be integrated with a more broader plan included in the European Union mechanism of civil protection. And so these are the two things that the EU could do immediately. But then there are also some more structural policies that could be activated. First, for instance, the strengthening of the EU healthcare and civil protection instrument to respond to outbreaks. And so regarding this, we should ask a bit like Massimiliano Nespola was saying yesterday, we should ask to relaunch the constitutional debate, because in order to strengthen the EU healthcare and civil protection strategy, we should give true competence to the European Union on these two strategic fields. And so we should, as the treaty establishing a constitution of Europe, which was never activated actually, was proposing, we should give true competence, a shared competence between the EU and member states on healthcare and civil protection, rather than a merely support competence, which is the actual competence. And so this would mean not only to coordinate the action of member states under emergency circumstances like this one, but to frame an harmonic legislation in these two strategic fields. And then, of course, the other central objective should be the contribution of the European Union to global instrument. Yesterday, someone, I think it was Roberto Goya from ECIT Foundation, was proposing to trigger the European Globalization Adjustment Fund. And actually, we know that global funds are the one more suitable to address this emergency. So let's see what we can do under the aspect. Of course, one thing that we should add to the petition is just that one that I mentioned, to trigger the European Globalization Adjustment Fund. And then we should also increase financial aids for low and middle income countries, especially in Africa and South Asia, to reinforce their health system for new epidemics. This proposal in particular was coming from an article published on a journal of medicine wrote by Bill Gates. And then we should also ratify international human rights instruments allowing individual application in case of denial of economic, social, and cultural rights, with particular attention to that right to science. We know that right to science has a lot of implication, especially regarding the open access to scientific information. And this is very important, and we know the violation of this that has been caused in China, and all the implication that this is having regarding this pandemic. We should also, it's also urgent for the UN to devise guidelines for the correct reporting of the implementation of health as science-related rights along the line of the General Comment on Science adopted in March 2020, and promote the establishment of a special rapporteur on the subject to monitor the enjoyment of the benefits of science. Another objective is to promote international collaboration on data sharing and foster the production of open data. Reach consensus on research priority and trial protocols in order to allow vaccine and antiviral candidates to move quickly through planned decision-making processes. Invest in disease surveillance, creating debates of cases that are immediately and easily accessible to relevant organizations, providing rules requiring countries to share the information produced free of charge. Strengthen the coordination and sharing of a list, including local and international trained teams that can be quickly mobilized. Strengthen the coordination and platform sharing so that regulatory reviews can take place quickly based on evidence and medical scientific needs, enabling suppliers to produce low-cost doses on a large scale in a simple way. and then ensure adequate funding in partnership with the private sector to enable existing structure to be rapidly reorganized for production during a pandemic, including through the creation of a proper emergency funds to finance the procurement and distribution of vaccine to population in need wherever they are. Well, these are a list of global action that could be implemented to tackle the pandemic. Later, Marco Perduca will enter more in detail in these measures. Of course, then also Virgilio D'Astoli will introduce the economic measure that could be implemented to face this emergency. As I was saying, this draft of petition is open to modification, and yesterday we received a lot of suggestion. For example, Monica Frassoni was proposing also to address some critical measures that has been implemented in these days by the European Union, for example, closing international border and the unacceptable fact that the European Parliament has been closed. So there are a lot of other things that we should include. Also, other suggestion by Federica from Cesue. We know that there are a lot of aspects that are also included in some of your initiatives, and so we will see during this debate if there are even other proposals that we can add to the text. Now I hear my echo. I don't know what's the problem, so I will give the floor to Virgilio D'Astoli.
Just 1 second, Lorenzo, before moving to Virgilio. Monica has a couple of questions, Monica Frassoni, so I will probably give her the space to ask questions. And then we have a feedback in the chat from Nicolò Milanese, who says, I think we should say any vaccine, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce vaccino, developed should be in the public domain. I leave Monica for a couple of questions, so we see if Lorenzo can answer or if they will be covered by Virgilio D'Astoli.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I don't put my video because my line is not that strong, so if you allow me only to have my voice. So I wanted to say that if this is it's a sort of preliminary question. This is a petition to the European Parliament. And therefore, I think that we should perhaps put a little bit more emphasis on what the powers of the European Parliament are. Therefore, I am a little bit skeptical on all the global parts. Perhaps we can put it in a different way, and I'm really eager to listen to what Marco Perduca will tell us. And I think that we should frame a little bit more this petition on the powers of the European Parliament. For example, Article 48, in terms of reform of the treaties, we should ask them that they start the procedure to change the treaties, and to be a little bit more precise on the economic side. I have a couple of proposals, but this is really a sort of preliminary issue. Do we want to have a petition that is specifically directed to the European Parliament and which therefore refers to what they can actually deliver, or we just want to make a more general text as it is this one, and therefore create a sort of occasion of discussion, because I think that the two things are relatively different.
Thank you, Monica. Probably let's have the comment from Virgilio D'Astoli, who I guess can start to get back to you on the feedback. And I add it to the notes so that it's there. And also, let's all take into account this comment from Monica on the different techniques and strategies we could have potentially, and who we are addressing and how. Virgilio D'Astoli on the petition, and if you want also on the rule of law, which is always a good topic to hear about from you. Let me see.
Virgilio desaparecido.
Okay, we lost him.
No, he's there. I can see him, Virgilio.
Virgilio, 1 second that I need to activate his mic maybe. Okay, let's try. Virgilio, try to speak.
Let's see if he can call maybe.
Waiting for Virgilio. Virgilio, maybe just a quick a first answer to Monica. The idea was to combine both. On one side, what the European Parliament could actually do directly within its competencies, and on the other side, what the European Parliament could ask for to other institutions to do. So the global picture, we are proposing to put it in the petition, just to remind that this is a global emergency. So it's very important to have a kind of European response within the European powers, and so the mandate of the Parliament. But on the other side, also to have Europe, and so also the European Parliament active in proposing a more globally coordinated response. So the ambition would be to combine both levels.
Per quale ragione non mi sentivate? Io vi sentivo molto bene.
Virgilio, ti sentiamo adesso, ti sentiamo.
Sì, ci deve essere un problema tecnico, sì.
Floor is
Virgilio, we can hear
E
you.
Chiara, sono su questa conference call, ci dobbiamo sentire più tardi, come ho scritto, sì. Grazie. Hello?
Hello,
Hi,
Virgilio. We
Virgilio.
can hear everything. You can go.
Hello? You listen
Yes.
me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we do.
I don't know why it was a problem. So first of all, good morning. Concerning the petition, I think that in this moment we have to concentrate our initiative on this part of economic aspects, but mainly on the question of the European budget. You know that there is a kind of deadlock in the Council or European Council concerning the financial framework from 2021, and there is no agreement. I think that we have to concentrate, as is written in the petition, on one specific demand to European Parliament. As you know, and as Monica said also, the Parliament has a power concerning the financial framework, because the Council could decide on the financial framework only after the assent of the European Parliament. Without assent of the European Parliament, there is no financial agreement. So I think that the European Parliament has to ask the Commission to withdraw the text proposed by the Juncker Commission the 2nd of May 2018, that was made in a very different part of the history of Europe, and ask the von der Leyen Commission to submit to the Council and to the Parliament a new financial framework, take into account first the European Green Deal that was not in the text of the Juncker Commission. Secondly, to take into account the consequence of the emergency on the coronavirus. Third, to take into account the fact that is not enough the initiative of the European Central Bank and the Eurobond. We need a kind of federal budget based on own resources, as it was proposed by the high-level group chaired by Mario Monti. So I think that the European Parliament could ask a political demand to the European Commission, as I said, to withdraw the text of the 2nd of May and to submit another text. I think that we have to concentrate our demand on this point. On the contrary, because in the petition I saw that you ask the Parliament to propose something concerning the modification of the competencies of the European Union. As you know, that is a modification of the treaties. I'm not so sure that a petition, as it's written in the treaty, could ask the Parliament to start the proposal, the procedure of the Article 48 of the treaty concerning the modification of the treaty. Apart the fact that I am very skeptical concerning the Article 48, because you know the convention is a body very weak, very contradictory, and in any case the convention could submit proposals to an intergovernmental conference. So my opinion is that we have to separate the two things. One thing concerning the urgence of the budget, and the other thing concerning the future of Europe. My opinion is that it's not so easy to put the two things together. And concerning the rule of law, the economy is very related to the rule of law, because if you see the Charter of Fundamental Rights, you can see in the Charter the chapter concerning the solidarity, and I think that the rule of law concerning also solidarity. And so we have to probably in our petition to European Parliament concerning the rule of law also take into account the question of solidarity, for example, concerning the minorities, because this emergency concerning the coronavirus virus create a lot of problems for the minorities, the poor people, the immigrants, the old people, and so on. So that is a very important point. And the second point is the question that is very important concerning the democracy, that the laws adopted during the emergency created a new system of common rules that could create a weakness in the democratic system. And I am afraid that after the emergency, this kind of new procedures concerning, for example, the fact that the role is more in the hands of the governments and not in the parliament, and also the role of civil society. I am afraid that after the emergency, the executive, the governments will maintain this kind of procedures that they have adopted to fight against the emergency. We have to pay a strong attention about this risk. And so I think that we have to probably to modify the rule of law, our proposal to take into account the risk that after the emergency, the democratic system at European level will be changed, take into account the new system that were adopted by the governments during this procedure. So the two things are very related.
Thank you, Virgilio. I add as an element for the discussion the news that, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, that President Sassoli will suggested to have the plenary of the European Parliament on the 26th of March. So also I would ask to everyone, particularly for those who have more experience, if this is a date that we can have in mind for some urgent issues that we want to pose to the Parliament, and how potentially we could do that, because of course the timing of the petition is longer than the next plenary of the Parliament. So, but it's an important information to have in mind, I believe, in the definition of actions and issues that we want to tackle in the sort of emergency urgent moment. Let's see if we have Monica. Yes, of course, we have Monica for another comment.
Yes, I want to go back to the resolution, to the petition. I must say that it doesn't happen very often, but I don't agree very much with what Virgilio said. Because if the idea here is to make the European Parliament move, or among the ideas is the movement of the European Parliament, I think that we have to give some kind of ideas which have direction. Now, I think that there are 2 or 3 different hooks that we can use. One is what we discussed yesterday, the conference on Europe. This thing is not yet decided, it's not yet defined, and there is still, as you very well know, there is ongoing a sort of hard discussion on whether or not the conference of the future of Europe should include the question of the treaty changes. I think they should include the treaty changes. This is still an ongoing question. The Parliament asked for it, but I think that we have to link this petition also to this initiative. And the second is the question of the changes of the treaty again, and the capacity. I'm not referring to the end of the process. I am referring to the beginning of the process. And one of the actors that can begin the process is the European Parliament. And through the Article 48, which has a lot of problems, etc. But here we are starting to see, we are reopening or trying to reopen the question of the constitutional changes. And I believe that since we are speaking to the European Parliament, we have to address the European Parliament with the instrument that the European Parliament itself can use. I am not that confident that the European Parliament will take this occasion, but I believe that we can start using we can ask the Parliament to use instruments that they have in order to reopen the constitutional issues, which is indeed the question of the competences on health, the question of their own resources, the question of the budget, etc., which in more or less measure than the unanimity require treaty changes. So I think that this element must be in our or should be in our petition, and should be. We can also be divided from the other one, but it must be somehow present. So yes, we need to reopen the discussion about the Constitution of Europe, or if you want, about the reform of the EU treaty, even if people are afraid and even if people are not even daring to say it. Because the crisis demonstrated that the current institutional setting is really not the right one. And I think that that message should be very clear. Then there is a whole economic part. I think that the current text is probably a little bit insufficient. I sent today over to Virginia and Marco some proposals, because of course we are not the only one thinking around what should be done. Personally, I was never particularly hot about a separate budget for the Eurozone. This is an element that is discussed, but I do agree that the political fight today is around the MFF and the capacity of increasing the budget, of setting new instruments like taxes, etc. So yes, let's keep this financial element or this economic element distinct in the petition, but let's not eliminate the previous one, and let's orientate it to what the European Parliament should do as the representative of the citizens, and not just to and really concentrate on asks that we can go to the European Parliament with, to the President of the European Parliament with directly, speak with the presidents of the different group and the political forces, and trying to mobilize an action within the Parliament on at least one or two of these topics, but let's not say that the initiative that we can take on the constitutional side should be excluded because the convention in 2003 was bad. I think that we have indeed to be more creative. We have to use the instrument that we have, and this is Article 48, the Conference on the Future of Europe, and the powers of the European Parliament on budgetary and economic issues. So I would structure it in this way. It remains open, the whole discussion about the global role. I agree with Marco. We can certainly find some more effective and less confused way of linking to the discussion that we are doing towards the European Parliament and the European Union. But I believe that we have to increase, let's say, our clarity on who should we target and how we should at least try to reach a little bit of result in terms of mobilization of concrete people within the European Parliament that could be sensitive to this kind of message.
Thank you, Monica. So for all the participants, you can always subscribe to talk. With Lorenzo and Octavian and Diana, we are adding all these comments into the document. There is a section of the collaborative notes at the bottom, which is the actual text of the petition. So we are adding comments there so that we have a living material to work with. So we have Virgilio, who wants to replicate to Monica. And then if someone else wants to talk, I think it's a good moment. So feel free to add yourself to the list. Virgilio D'Astoli.
No, I agree totally, of course, with Monica about the importance to open the way to a constituent process to modify the treaties. But the question is that the Parliament in the next weeks will take a position concerning the budget. The budget committee is discussing a draft report concerning a recommendation on a safety net to protect the beneficiaries of union program setting up the multi-annual financial framework. I think that that is not enough. I think that I said before that the Parliament who should ask the Commission to withdraw the financial framework of the 2nd of May 2018 and to change it with another financial framework. The second question is the question concerning the future of Europe. So my opinion is that you have to submit to the Parliament two different petitions, one concerning the budget and one concerning the future of Europe. And concerning the future of Europe, I'm sorry, I'm not so sure that the conference will start this year. It's totally sure that the conference will not start the 9th of May. And the question is that we have to discuss about, do we think that the conference that is a body without democratic accountability, and the body without capacity to deliver, it's the best way to not also to open the discussion concerning the future of Europe, but to open discussion for the modification of the treaties. I think that we have to submit to the Parliament a petition asking to the Parliament to take the lead of the question of the modification of the treaties. But that is the reason, because I think that the two things that are related, of course, are complementary, have to be in the two different petitions. One is urgent, that concerns the question of the budget, and the second is the question of the discussion concerning the modification of the treaty, that of course we support strongly in the same way that Monica said.
Thank you, Virgilio. We do not have other people added to the list of speakers at this stage. I mean, in theory, Marco Perduca was supposed to speak at 11:30, but maybe if he's ready, we can anticipate his, or at least Marco Perduca wants to add some perspectives on this debate, or we can move to the right to science as a whole and probably the relationship between global and European level. Maybe that's a good moment to have this conversation.
Yeah, I think I can say a few things about what has been said so far. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, everybody. I think the last part of this discussion between Monica and Pier Virgilio is very important to keep in mind, technically, but also politically. And I think one of the possible compromises that is coming out from the last few things said by Pier Virgilio should be taken into consideration. That is, on the one hand, given also all the elements that Lorenzo Mineo has presented that are contained in the draft of the petition that we have been working on, require an extra budget line or a few extra budget lines, or certainly an allocation of resources that has to be dedicated to do all that. Going to the heart of the problem, which is in fact open a discussion once again on the total budget, it seems to be a very good idea. And then on the other hand, certainly the second petition, at this point, I'm sorry, maybe a third petition that we want to draft. But also to complement what Marco has said before, trying to answer what Monica was raising in her first or second intervention, I think the idea here, and we also discussed it yesterday, is to try and give a sense that if there is a growing number of European citizens that are not necessarily satisfied by the way in which the EU as a whole works, we should identify not only the best ways to make our voice heard, but taking the hint from the crisis situation that we are living now, articulate some proposals that come from today's emergency, but look at the future, and a future which is radically and comprehensively different. We keep on hearing heads of states and heads of government talk about war. We are in a war state. We need to reply as if we were in a war. And if we look also at our national constitutions, there is a special clause on how a country should respond in terms of war. Well, luckily, at least for us within the European Union, because of the borders of the European Union, or if we look at Slovenia and Croatia, that might have not been the case. We haven't seen a war in 70 years. So the emergency is not only a war, it's something different. People attribute it to a variety of things. A lot of people that are against the globalization for whatever reasons believe this is also the result of a world that has gone too far without controls and limits and borders. So while we go to the heart of the problem, we have also to try and identify or design what we believe is the heart of the problem. The money is certainly part of the heart, but even bigger is a revolution in cultural terms that needs to put at the center of a new, whatever it is, treaty, Europe as a whole, tripartite or quadripartite, a set of institutions has to be articulated around different principles and different priorities. And this is why, and after this comment, I'll start what I was supposed to be saying. We believe that with all the elements that the international community has been putting together to try and specify why science and everything that revolves around science we have today is important, and is important not only for the scientific community or for the health community and the right to health or the enjoyment of the right to health as this is written in a variety of documents. It is important as such, as one of the main components of democracy. I think Virgilio at some point also made this link, but it would be very useful to try and improve or expand what he said about the lack of the capacity of responding to today's crisis has also a very significant and structural negative impact on our democracy. We are in a situation in which, by administrative decisions, countries, governments are imposing lockdowns around the member states of the European Union. This is happening, it's happened, and will continue to happen without any political debate. This is in patent and systematic violation of our rights, however you want to consider them. Let's start with national constitutions and international rule of law. An administrative decision cannot have an impact on individual liberties. I'm not advocating to disobey those rules. I'm only saying that the way in which they are imposed is not, has not followed the usual liberal and democratic process of proposing, discussing, and coming to a conclusion, which in the process of this proposing, discussing, and finding a compromise not only is the personification of democracy, but also assists us. I see a lot of bad faces. Am I having a bad connection?
Yeah, I think your voice is jumping. If you can turn off the camera and only talk, I think it would be better. Could you try?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Sounds better. Sounds better.
Yeah, no, I'm also switching off the phone, so perhaps I'm using more coverage. So what I was trying to say that the way in which governments are acting these days for the sake of having an emergency response, which needs to be timely or immediate if you want, it's not in line with our constitutional rights nationally or internationally codified. And this, in a way, is also the product of not having taken into consideration science structurally in the past. I see that my microphone comes and goes, so my line is switching me off. Okay, no, because right. And part of that science that has not been taken into consideration was the science of numbers, of statistics, of previsions. How is it possible? And I think Pier Virgilio explained it quite thoroughly in a podcast that we recorded at the beginning of the week, that a group of 27, 28 member states decided not to include among their structural and fundamental and founding elements things like pandemics or epidemics. There are certainly some possibilities to react in very serious situations like the ones that we are facing today, and in a way we are seeing that little by little, but with a huge delay, the European institutions are trying to respond to that. But if you don't include, when you take political decisions, all the numbers and all the possible elements that science has been working on, because science has been working on these things over the years, we are not providing the people with the best political decisions. Now, if all this was theory until a few weeks ago, now, thanks to a 3-year work of a committee of experts coordinated at the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights of the United Nations, it is no longer theory. It's a well-constructed, comprehensive document which has been offered to the public at the beginning of this year, that is going to be published in its final version in a month or so. It's a document that goes on for almost 20 pages in over 90 paragraphs, in which it is clearly explained what the right to science, the human right to science, is about, and what governments are obliged to do to have that right fully enjoyed. The right is composed of 3 elements: to take part in cultural life, to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its applications, to benefit from the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production which the person is the author. States must take all necessary steps for the conservation, development, and diffusion of science and culture, and to respect the freedom indispensable for scientific research and creativity. The last part of the right is possibly what is the most important part these days, and what has been in the back of our minds when we have drafted the document that Lorenzo Mineo presented, and I think in a way, if not stated as such, was also in the back of the mind of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation when they published that article with a lot of recommendations that we have summarized and to a certain extent expanded. States must recognize the benefits to be derived from the encouragement and development of international contacts and cooperation in the scientific and cultural fields. So what we are asking the European Union, and will be asking the rest of the world, is this: cooperate and work towards a condivision which is a little stronger than just sharing. Condivision means reciprocal or coordinated division of one of its resulting divisions. So this is what the new scenario that not only we need to face today, but this is the new scenario that could be the guiding light of the future of Europe. Many of the people connected today are European federalists, others consider themselves Europeanists or whatever, or pro-Europe. So we have the best audience today to address all these issues. But there are some key words, principles that are already in a lot of international human rights instruments that need to be highlighted and need to be translated into some precise proposals and reforms. Can those proposals be given by the people we are asking them to? Possibly not. That is not a good reason not to launch those proposals. Then there will be someone with, and I think Monica and Pier Virgilio and Marco, that have been within the EU sphere in Brussels to know more, and will have also other people to talk to understand which would be the best mechanism or technical way of making those proposals. But I think we need to agree on some common ground, and the common ground, at least starting from this day's emergency, is coming from science. Virginia said that some of us are just back from a 2-day event we organized in Addis Ababa, thanks to the hospitality and facilitation of the Commission of the African Union, where we had the 6th session of the World Congress of Freedom of Scientific Research, which was entitled "The Right to Enjoy the Benefits of Science." The title was chosen last summer, but the meeting happened in the midst of the outbreak of the coronavirus crisis. And even if the virus was not discussed as such, I would invite you to go and visit the Facebook page of Science for Democracy to listen to the 5 panel discussions, and also on sciencefordemocracy.org to have a look at the final recommendations adopted there. But they all rotate and gravitate around this right to science. The general comment that I was mentioning before, without calling it such, so the general comment is the document adopted by the UN experts. The general comment, of course, is not the new Bible, but should be used as guidelines to oblige member states to report correctly on what they do, vis-a-vis the 3 elements we mentioned before of the right to science. The right to science is also a new right to be taken into consideration in strategic litigations for international jurisdictions or before national jurisdictions. The Associazione Luca Coscioni has already started last year questioning parts of a law about assisted medical procreation that in Italy not only limits the possibility to access to those techniques or to revoke one's consent to use those techniques, but at the same time does not allow the use of Italian or made in Italy stem cells in scientific research. On the first part of the complaint, the committee said that we were right. There was a problem in access to the right to health, which is Article 12 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. On the second issue, the one on limiting research arbitrarily, they said that there was not enough jurisprudence on this. Well, now, not only there will be some sort of jurisprudence, even if negative, because the decision was not favorable for us. So there are additional elements that would clarify what this right to allow freedom of scientific research is about. And this is something that is very important. But in order to make this jurisprudence grow, we need to involve governments or invite governments in ratifying the necessary international instruments to recognize this quasi-jurisdiction, and not all members of the European Union have ratified the optional protocol to the covenant yet. So that is also an important part to keep in mind, nationally and internationally. Lastly, we need to have someone or a group of people that systematically monitor the way in which this right, which is very comprehensive, includes also the right of freedom of speech. We know that scientists are being arrested around the world, starting from China, where in fact the coronavirus was firstly identified already after Christmas last year, without letting the discoverers of this new virus publicize their discoveries. So in a way, not only in this case they violated the right and freedom of speech of the scientists, but they generated what we are facing today, or they accelerated what we are facing today. And so the figure or the institution of a special rapporteur on the right to science should also be one of the other proposals that from Europe, because it needs also money to work and operate in the best possible way, should be exported to the rest of the world. All the other punctual recommendations attach the various issues that we have addressed today in the document that Lorenzo presented, with particular attention to biotechnology. So I don't know how much you're following the developments of that are interesting the world vis-a-vis a possible cure for the virus. It was published yesterday that one of the 10 possible vaccines is being developed from GMO plants. And so because we had one of the father of genetically modified plants with us in Africa, who made a very simple but very well argued case to adopt sensible legislation when it comes to genetic enhancement and improvement, I think that this crisis should also be some sort of a philosophical crisis for people that have not necessarily been open to take into consideration what science has been developing also in those ethically sensible fields, because apparently the results are coming out from those very critical fields, and they need to be tested. They need to go through all the 3 phases of clinical trials, but we have to give them a chance to be of assistance of what we are trying to do here. And what we're trying to do here is not only to cure people that got COVID-19, we are trying to help people at the decision-making level to have all of the possible elements of information and knowledge to take the best possible decision in the interest of, at this point, not only their citizens, but the world at large. Because something that doesn't work in a country that has a viral problem will certainly become a problem for the neighboring countries or the countries on the other side of the world. I would like to end with 2 things, and again stress that you can find the information included, the general comment on science on sciencefordemocracy.org, with 2 political judgments, I would say. On the one hand, we have China, which is inviting countries, starting from Italy, which is the second biggest, as of yesterday, actually, possibly the biggest victim of the coronavirus in terms of people that died, to adopt their own measures, which are lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. On the other hand, we have the United States, which until yesterday was completely against any kind of multilateral decision-making body. After 2 days or 3 days or maybe a week of emergency, they are going exactly in the opposite direction that they had taken at the beginning of their national crisis, doing more or less, and we'll see how they're actually developing their national policies, what the World Health Organization has been saying, which is test. And so they're distributing tests. In some states like California and New York State, where they have some of the biggest groups, they are distributing tests like crazy. So this is also something that we need to take into consideration when we talk about policy development or suggestions or proposal for policy reform. The world has been organized in regional and international organization is stuck at Yalta. We are in 2020. We need to develop, I'm not saying a new world order, because that will scare everybody, those in favor and those against. But if there's no cooperation and no condivision of knowledge and responsibilities between existing institutions, we will next time around, and we hope that there's going to be a next time soon, we have to face an emergency, we will be back to square one. And so the United Nations itself, and we at Science for Democracy also, we have two pillars. One is directed to try and influence a dialogue with the EU, and the other one with the UN. The UN has been working for years to come with a coordinated system of alert, cooperation, and sharing of knowledge and competition. And they have produced an immense amount of literature, position paper, recommendation paper that are there, but no one has been using these things. Now, in a moment in which we are asked to use things, we have to use all the things that have been produced so far. It is not difficult to prepare a list of readings for this and that. I think thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a lot of that reading has already been condensed in a set of specific proposal. But for us to have a more political approach, we have to translate those specific points that we are suggesting should become reforms into a bigger and wider political scenario. And the political scenario is this: cooperation and condivision, certainly not at the detriment of fundamental human rights. Safe and free is the new slogan. You can be safe and free at the same time. One does not trump the other. Only being free at the end of the day risks of putting your personal health and safety situation at risk, and that of all the people around us. We are seeing it. So we need to arrive at the persuasion that what we are doing today is our interest and in the interest of our community, which is made of 7.5 billion people and not 75 people that live in the same building. We need at the same time not to deflect our attention and monitoring of how the institutions are responding. I don't know if at some point some sort of civil disobedience, maybe virtual, should be invoked. But if the decisions that are taken are not up to the challenge in practical terms, but at the same time violate our fundamental human rights, something will need to be done. I don't think that the petition in that will suffice, but I think this is why we want to discuss these things with as many people as possible. Good start. A lot of things were promoted today. Also, when we will have some members of the current members of the European Parliament later, we should continue the discussion. And tomorrow, for those who speak Italian, we have an additional 8 hours of trying to address all this issue. But we need to use the new information and elements available, thanks to the general comment on the right to science, to have science be enrolled, and I apologize for this military term, as the best ally of democracy. And if you go through the 90 paragraphs, and with this I will conclude, you will be sure that you will find a lot of inspiration of how something that has to do with research, sharing of knowledge, and enjoying the benefits of the latest discoveries of science is a paradigm for how democracy, and liberal democracy in particular, should work. Thanks.
Thank you, Marco Perduca. very inspiring comment for me. We have Sibilla Barbieri, and I invite the others to add yourself to the list so that we can keep this moving. Okay, Sibilla Barbieri and then Leonello Zacquini. Vai, Sibilla.
Hi. The first things, I agree with a lot of the points that are the necessity that D'Astoli and also Perduca said before me. There is these are when they speak about the importance of the sense or importance of about the budget of the European community, I'm absolutely agree. What is my concern is about the efficiency of our way to obtain this. The petition is are very weak. Is a system that is weak, and I don't know in which way a group of citizens that can understand exactly what we need to be done could be efficient in the way in which they can obtain what they want. So I was thinking about what is going to happen in the in future. Because right now we see that in Italy we are completely stuck, but that is only the first wave. In the future, all Europe are going to be in the same situation, and so we are going to go through month and month about the impossibility to be together physically and to exchange in the way in which we know before. So I was thinking, for this reason, I was talking yesterday about what can be a new way to push our goals in the future. And for this reason, I was speaking about the improving, because the life is done in this way. In this moment, we are stopped. But after a moment in which we are confused, we started to organize the game. And so the way in which this happened is in improving the new media and the digitalizzazione, okay? And so for this reason, I think that it is very natural that we look for a new way to convey our point. And for this reason, I speak about a platform, because in the platform, we can convey our for the information that we speak about that is a point for Eumans to give all the citizens the right information about new possibility to do politics, also the debate, also the mobilization that we want to do. The petition can have an help if we have a platform that work. And why the Parliament, the European Parliament, could be interested in to give us the help to build this platform is because there is a serious risk for the Europe. And for this reason, probably we can help. We can have some economic help to build a platform that can give us the possibility to communicate our new goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sibilla. We got Leonello Zacquini And let me check if there is something else. No.
Hello.
So no, we have a, yeah, 1 second. I just read the comment on the chat from Simona Kulish of Bonfante, who I think cannot talk at the moment. She was getting back to Perduca saying, that's what I was trying to propose yesterday, a common initiative to keep attention on fundamental rights and liberties under attack by national states due to the emergency. I think it was a feedback to Marco Perduca, final part of his intervention. Okay, Leonello Zacquini, and then whoever wants to talk.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. I hope that you are hearing me. I have to say that I have a hearing problem. My personal question, and today I had some more problem in hearing you. I'm afraid that I repeat something that you already said, but let me, in any case, add some short consideration. I and we, like Più Democrazia Italia, we read the petition, and generally we approve all the content that is very suitable to present such a petition. Just some short consideration. First of all, is that correct to present several and different topics just in a single petition? Maybe it should be suitable, or should be better to present several different petition. In this way, it could be more simple to collect signatures. As you know, the petition in Europe, they do not need a limit of signature, but I imagine that it should be interesting and important ask for signatures. And if we present a text that includes several different topics, it could be difficult to collect signatures due to the fact that somebody is agree some aspect, does not agree some other aspect. Therefore, it could be a suggestion to present different different petition on different more homogeneous topics. Second question and final question is, I imagine that some of the topics in our petition, we could also look ahead to some other existing tool of direct democracy existing in Europe, which is the European Citizens Initiative. As you know, the European Citizens Initiative need an year, need 1 million of signature, but I imagine that we should look also to this to utilization of this very important tool just already existing in Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Leonello. So we have 2 other people added to the speakers list, who are Manlio Trovato and Samuele Nannoni. And in the meantime, I will add the last comments in the chat in the collaborative notes. It's 11:07, and a few people joined, so I just recap where we are in this morning session and where we started from. So we are focusing on 2 aspects. The first one is a sort of urgent petition to the European Parliament and consequent actions in relation to the management of the emergency. And so there's been quite a debate. You find it all summarized in the working document around how to shape this proposal. And then there is the larger topic, which is on other issues and matters that, again, some of them are related to the coronavirus or kind of aggravated by the coronavirus situation. Others are not necessarily related, but we are discussing how this could be worked on and promoted. There is an underlying proposal, which I remind to everyone, which is that we could, we should wait what happens with the Conference on the Future of Europe, but on the other side, imagine intermediate appointments, which might be the prosecution of this work that we are doing with the first meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy, potentially something around May to work on this set of proposals, and then an appointment in November suggested by Lorenzo Marsili as a sort of a European Citizen Assembly element. So I just remind these elements so that the debate can move according to these lines. And in the links, Octavian just reshared the collaborative notes, which are covering all the topics that we are discussing. So now we have Manlio Trovato, subscribed, and Samuele Nannoni, and I will add here also the list of the additional topics that we suggested as a basis for the debate. Manlio Trovato from London.
Hello and good morning, everyone. I've been listening yesterday and today, and one of the thoughts that I had is there's no quick fix to democracy. It takes a lot of work and a lot of hard work. So small steps are really necessary. And this morning, focusing on the proposals to improve democracy is really crucial. So I wanted to talk about a specific proposal on right to housing, effective right to housing, as part of the social welfare, which is very connected to what we're having now as part of the COVID emergency. The way society is responding to the COVID emergency is to use a policy of stay at home. Clearly, for those who don't have a home, and there are about 700,000 people in Europe, that's not possible. And yet, the right to housing is one of the fundamental rights which the European Union is built upon. Now, what is the issue in my view? The issue in my view is that the way the European Union is adopting social housing is based on a concept of having housing readiness first. So you have the right to have a house only if you're ready to have a house, and therefore I'll give you a house. Clearly driven by limiting economical capabilities, because houses cost. But it's similar to saying that you will have a right to right to your health only if you comply with only if you're ready to be healthy. So if you go to a hospital and you have a problem because you're obese, you eat too much, you go to hospital and you have blood circulation problems, they would say, sorry, I can't cure you unless you go on a diet. Well, actually, the right to health is the other way around. I first cure you, and then I tell you, now you have to go on a diet. You need to make sure you eat healthy, otherwise you won't be able to become healthy again and heal. That's the same thing for housing. When people don't have a house and are homeless, they need, as a first thing, a house as a first step to recover, and the first step to rebuild their life, and a first step to address the issues that have taken them to become homeless. There is a very this concept is called housing first. It's not new. It's been used in US. Has been used more recently in Finland very effectively, and it's also been shown to be quite effective from both a homeless perspective, i.e., as a lot of people have been able to change their life, and the homeless issue has reduced drastically in Finland, but also in the long run has been shown to be economically effective. Requires initial investment to have the houses available, but then in the long run, the maintenance of the homeless problem becomes more economical. And so, can we should Europe as an institution foster those best practices across all the member states, and should Europe be a bit stronger in the way Europe manages and supervises the right to housing across all the European Union? I think it should. I think it should, and I think that having a petition which would ensure that Europe takes ownership of this social problem, clearly by delegation to the member states, but taking ownership or the oversight of the homeless problem across the European Union, and establishes principles, and also establishes a monitoring framework to ensure that the member states are complying with the principles. It is an important thing. We're really here, and all of us is scared because we're seeing thousands of people dying, and we're seeing that this number could become hundreds of thousands of people. But we do have now today 700,000 people in the streets, and they're not dead, but they're close to it. So it is a social emergency, and the petition should include, in my view, the ownership of the European Union of the oversight of the problem, the measurement of the problem as a first step. We don't have official statistics from the European Union. We have non-profit organizations who measure that problem, but we don't have official statistics from the European Union. So the European Union should measure that and issue official statistics. The guidelines on the best practices and establishing the principles that the right to house is non-conditional. That actually has to follow then clearly with a process of rehabilitation and making that sustainable. But the right to housing should be non-conditional. And then an oversight mechanism to ensure that this policy is effective in terms of the number of homeless that we will see experiencing over time, with a view that there is a program over a number of years that will reduce the number of homeless in society. I strongly think that this is an important social change and part of the social mission of the European Union. And I'm proposing that we include a petition in these terms as part of our initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Manlio Trovato. We do have Samuele Nannoni, and I'm from Odegal, and then Lorenzo Mineo.
Yes, hello to everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much for this second day. No, I just wanted to refer to what Marco Cappato said this morning about the opportunity to have one or more citizen assemblies at the European level facing the the issue of the future of Europe, and in particular the emergency of the coronavirus. I just wanted to say that so in this crucial moment, we have to obviously strengthen our democracy, and in particular obviously strengthen it at the European level. That is the level that maybe much more than all the other levels, national levels, needs to be strengthened. And we also have to catch the opportunities coming from this virus and the changes in our life that it's brought. And one of these is the opportunity, for example, to understand that democracy, democratic practice can be done also if people cannot meet each other. And for example, what we are doing right now and what we did yesterday is a sort of proof that things can be done, that people can meet and discuss and also deliberate without meeting personally. So I just wanted to briefly present a project that 1 year ago Oderal but also with Lorenzo Mineo and Cappato itself, Associazione Luca Coscioni and Science for Democracy, we present a project for the creation of European virtual citizen assemblies. So citizen assemblies online that had to be done on an online platform, and they were their structure was based on volunteer citizens in each country, and that had to register on this online platform. And then for that project was for each issue under votation in the European Parliament, but in this case we could imagine it for the issue of the future of Europe or facing the coronavirus. So for the issue, a number of citizens registered in the platform would be random selected, and these citizens would receive the a username and a password to enter the platform and start working on the issue with from their home with just a laptop, or I mean, and they would have document and files at their disposition to inform about the issue itself, the possibility to have, just like we are doing right now, to discuss with other people, and also to have a direct line with some experts of their nationality, obviously, about the issue. And so just to the aim was obviously to produce proposals and then to put all of them into votation in this virtual citizen assembly. So I think this could be a project that we can take under consideration, also for these new issues like the future of Europe and how can Europe face the coronavirus. I put in here in the chat the link to this project presented in Oderal website, and so I think could be an important step. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samuele, also for suggesting some practical
and like ideas on how what we're discussing could be built on. We have Lorenzo Mineo, who is also the coordinator on the work around the petition, the draft proposal that we're discussing. And then the next after him will be Hervé Parmentier from the Centre d'Action Laiqu. Lorenzo.
Thank you, Virginia. I will try to go fast because it's my second intervention, but I wanted to add first something to what Samuele said, and then give some idea regarding the rule of law initiative that could be addressed regarding this emergency. So first, regarding the Citizen Assembly, the proposal that Samuele has just described, that we wrote together with Alessandro Pluchino and Andrea Rapisarda, two Italian mathematicians, was slightly different from proper Citizen Assembly. It was not even a virtual Citizen Assembly because it was based on the idea that every individual is not communicating with the other, but only receiving information about the issue. And then this would have also a different scientific value because it's something that has never been experimented. The fact that the member of this experiment are not communicating each other, so there is no influence of anyone which could be more able to speak and this kind of thing, but it could be a new experiment. It's something slightly different from a virtual Citizen Assembly. We can say that if we are able to have a working team on this issue, and I'm sure that Andrea and Alessandro would be part of that, we can consider if propose a proper Citizen Assembly of this different kind of experiment. Of course, the topic would be coronavirus. Second, regarding the debate on fundamental rights that are under discussion in this emergency, I agree that is a very important topic. At the same time, it is very important the way we address this issue. I wouldn't I wouldn't put it as an attack of national states to our fundamental liberty. I see myself as a libertarian, so it's the first reaction that I had when I heard about this measure. At the same time, we have to pay attention, I think, because, of course, we need to have some public policies to address this emergency, and some public choice need to be, some policies need to be implemented, which will be, of course, partially invasive of our private life. And some of the alternative that has been proposed to lockdown could be considered even more dangerous for our privacy. For example, that the system of trace and track and trace that some states are implementing, like Israel, it's very invasive on private data. So I think that the first thing that we should ask in an initiative, it could be a petition or something else, is to have a proper open debate, as Marco Perduca was saying, on the kind of public policy, European public policy that should be implemented to face this emergency. So I would rather put the attention on the necessity of an open debate, because it's something that, for instance, in Italy, we hadn't. We had this measure without considering cost and benefits of any public policies that could have been implemented. So just to give some advice that could be useful if we want to have a working team on this topic.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I think at the end of the meeting, we will define some immediate steps and potential organizational elements if we want to, on how we want to carry this on. So we do have Hervé Parmentier, and then for the second, after his intervention, yes, Hervé,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Thanks for all those interesting contributions. I think we need maybe to examine things by an order of emergency degree, and I will speak a bit about the petition issue here and the possible meetings for later. I think that a constitutional treaty change is plea is maybe not the more urgent thing we can do, because I think we all will agree that we're not that happy with the way the EU has managed the situation for the moment until now, and that some real constitutional changes are necessary for the future to address some potential new crisis such as the one we are living in for the moment. So for the petition that we could file now, I would maybe concentrate more on the economic and social issues that are arising. I completely agree with the past intervener on the social housing issue, for instance, the question of homeless people, the question of unemployed people, the question of people that are losing their revenue now because their factory has closed. There are many social issues that could be tackled and that we could draw the attention on. It's not only a question of economic recovery, it's also a question of people that are knowing very severe difficulties for the moment. So a social message is not a bad one, actually. I found interesting reflections in the paper that Monica Frassoni has posted on the chat, who's apparently a project resolution from the Greens in the EP. I mean, it is as economic and social, and I think it's important. We should not forget the question of the national budgets, because we speak a lot and in the right way about the EU budget, but the pressure on the national budgets is immense, and the pressure should be alleviated in a way to for the states not to worry about the consequences, the financial consequences of what they need to spend for the moment in social affairs, in economic affairs. So the question of the national budgets, it's important also to me, and especially the question of the social security systems that, at least I see that in my country, is put under pressure, but it's always the part of the system that can save many people and save the revenues from many people. So I would concentrate more on what we can do now urgently, and I would also call on the EU institution to use the powers they have to the full extent, and maybe the EU has not been creative enough for the moment. Actually, there is a lot of legal basis in the treaty that can be used. There is many flexibilities that can be used. There is a need of creativity, for instance. I guess we could consider that there is for the moment a severe disruption of the functioning of the markets. It can be a legal basis that can be used to take exceptional measures. And I know it's a difficult debate. I mean, this question of the normal functioning of the state and the democratic control and the decisions to be taken in the circumstances we know now, but sometimes there is a necessity to push the system to its limits. Obviously, it's not a reason to stop to control democratically things, but anyway, there are some measures that could be taken, but maybe more efficiently under the control of the parliament, but still function a bit differently than what it was now. And for the rest, actually, for later, I think there were two good proposals this morning. One was the idea of a meeting of any kind around the 9th of May. Because I mean, this is maybe a good opportunity to introduce some plea for a changes in the treaty, and the proposal also to have a meeting in Berlin during the German presidency in autumn, we will be then at a moment where we will have more, I mean, we will have more information and more observation on the way things happened during that period, and it might be a good, those 2 moments might be good moments to introduce proposals for the future, for the next, I hope not, the crisis we could live, and for changes in the very structural functioning of the EU. We need a bit maybe of rear viewing to adjust the proposal we can make, actually. So I would separate 2 things. The urgent ones we could address in a petition for the moment, and that petition I think should essentially, outside of the health issues that could be tackled, but also concentrate on social issues as well as economic ones. And for the future, I think we get a bit of we need a bit of distance to put concrete proposals, and we have 2 moments to discuss around the 9th of May and autumn, for instance. And we know that debates on the changing in the treaties need times, need real deliberation, and even if we are not happy with the way things are going right now, I think on constitutional things, there is a need to have, I mean, in-depth reflections, and even if we have ideas on how to tackle things now, I mean, we talk about constitution, we talk about distribution of powers, we talk about equilibriums, balances, checks and balances, and it's not a light debate that we can have in non-emergency situations. Thanks.
Thank you, Hervé. Let me check if we have other people that want to talk. Not for the moment. In the meantime, there is a nice debate in the chat. Federica from Cesue shared the appeal that had been subscribed in the last days from, sorry, there is an ambulance. 1 second. And so it's interesting to see, of course, one of the reasons why we called for this Council on Participatory Democracy is because in the past weeks, even before the coronavirus crisis, as I was always saying, there is a great amount of appeals, initiatives, and platforms that are working on some of the issues that we are discussing as well here, and the methodologies. Sortition-based citizen assemblies is one of them. I think these. One of the purpose of these councils is also try to find ways how these informal open letters, appeals, and other networks can be channeled and transformed into something that has a direct hook with the instruments provided, or the instruments that needs to be invented for participatory democracy and a contribution to the actual functioning of democracy. So I think it's great if we can find ways to combine the instruments. Talking about citizen assemblies, I also remember that European Alternatives has a project on this, or a proposal on this. So I think, again, connecting Samuele, European Alternatives, and the other guys could be a good way to put together tools and instruments if we think it's a good idea. We do have someone else for a comment. Dario Fe. Hi, Dario. If you want, you can talk.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, if you can introduce briefly yourself so we know who you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my name is Dario. I'm from Italy and I live in Denmark at the moment. And I'm also active in Più Democrazia Italia with Leonello that I talked before. I just have a brief comment on this petition. I agree with, let's say I agree with it. In my opinion, we should state a little bit better why we are doing this, because it looks kind of we are a bunch of people who like Europe and would like Europe to act united. I think we should state very clearly that this is a pandemic event, and the definition of pandemic says that it can't be a problem of one country and or another country. It can't be an Italian problem. Pandemic, it's a world problem that should be treated theoretically at a international world scale, but it's better to do it at the European level rather than at a national level. I think we should state it more clearly in the document. And yes, this is that was my point.
Thank you, Dario.
And another question that arose yesterday when I was talking with my friend was, what if in Italy we get rid of this virus and abroad in other parts of Europe they don't, or they go for herd immunity like somebody was talking? Are we supposed to close the border to everybody who is coming from abroad? That can be also another reason why all Europe should act united, and we should try to solve it together. Yes, that was my point.
Thank you, Dario. We have Marco Cappato.
Thank you, Virginia. There are many things that are on the table with this petition, and of course, as Sibilla was reminding before, the petition is a very weak tool. So it is not just for the fact that we are writing down a document that all Europe will listen to us, and it would be, but it's a tool to find others, to try to make connection, to create a network of people connected in Europe, asking for the European Union to reform itself on one side and to take urgent measures to address the crisis, because what is lacking now is exactly a kind of European public opinion. There are national responses, and national responses are, if we see the situation in Italy, sometimes it tends to become also a nationalistic answer, because we are angry because of the fact that I don't know, other countries were not giving to us the mask, or I mean, or other countries in Europe are angry with the Italians because we are spreading the virus. There are a lot of stories going around of warring nationalism. So the petition could be useful in trying to mobilize prominent people and also public opinion around specific goals. And from the discussion, what I try to keep from the discussion is that, of course, we are talking about emergency measures and structural reforms. One of the suggestions from Hervé, for example, is to concentrate on urgent measures, and I think is correct suggestions in terms of balance, but I think we should also mention the need for structural reforms, because the two things are going together. So, of course, tomorrow, next week, we have to use the actual powers that the European Union already has in order to do whatever is possible from the economic point of view, from the social point of view, from the health and security point of view. So this is the core of the petition. But I think we should not give up to the idea of structural reforms. So the change of the treaties, because one of the elements of the crisis is exactly that the EU does not have direct power on health policies as it should be needed faced to a pandemic. So I think that this should be mentioned. I think that a good way of taking account of the worrying about the rule of law is so the issue that Simona Bonfante was raising yesterday and also today in the chat is the point that Virgilio was making of the risk for minorities. Well, there is a bigger risk for democracy in itself, but if we think about the situation in prisons, the situation of poor people, the situation of homeless, as Maglio was reminding, the situation of refugees and migrants, of course, in that segment of the population, the emergency is already raising not some risk, but some actual problems in the life of people. So I think that this is a good way of taking account of the rule of law in the context of the petition. Then also institutional reforms on how all this should be discussed. So the involvement of citizens, the idea of having virtual citizen assemblies. Well, I also think is something that we can include in the petition. Of course, is less urgent. I mean, is more urgent to have a mask to go to buy your food, but at the same time, we don't have to renounce to the idea that democracy and participation is something that should not be stopped during an emergency. So if we propose, as we have to be very, very careful in what the European Parliament action will be, I think also it's a very good news that the plenary session of next week will happen. There will be vote by emails and so on. So it's a very good thing. And I think that in this situation, insisting on the idea of having democracy innovation is also a good thing. So it's not something, okay, when everything will be done, will be finished, then we can go back and talk about the Conference of Future of Europe, citizen assemblies and so on. No, I think it's something that we should keep on talking right now. It's not something that we have to postpone for after the crisis. This is why I think that, of course, keeping the balance from most urgent measures and most long-term proposal, but I think it should be better to include both in the petition as a tool to explain how Europe could be used to face this crisis and to face and to address future crises. So both things should be linked together.
Thank you, Marco. I don't see other people that sign up to talk, but I'm happy to welcome now, even she was connected since a while, Eleonora Evi, MEP of the Five-Star Movement, the Italian Five-Star Movement. She's an MEP. Actually, she's also in the commission of the European Parliament which works on petitions. So she covers a lot of areas of the issues that we talked so far and yesterday. So thanks, Leonora, for being with us. I think it would be helpful, since you followed what we are discussing, if you can give us a bit of your perspective on the management of the emergency and also the actions that need to be tackled immediately and without forgetting the bigger issues that are always on the table, emergency or not emergency. But also, if you can tell us something about how the European Parliament is empowering itself these days, and what you see from your perspective, and everything else you want to add. But these are, I think, the two main lines. And thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for this meeting, for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. I've been listening to many of the comments so far, and I've been reading the petition you are proposing, and I find myself in agreement with what you are asking. Well, where should I start? The main feeling so far, I guess, from many of the European citizens is that Europe has been lacking to act promptly and rapidly to give a response to what is happening. And this has created and is creating even more disaffection than what has been already there for a while. And this is very bad. This is a clear signal that many changes has to be taken into account in this moment. What I can say is that we've seen a lack of solidarity since the beginning. Now things are a little bit changing. There is a set of instruments already there that have been now set. I mentioned, for example, the Corona Response Initiative, which is basically a new fund in order to give financial support to member states and to face this situation. But this is a good news, but at the same time, it is a bad news, because this Corona Response Initiative basically is not made of new and fresh money, but it's the same money already there in the cohesion policies that have been just redirected to some other areas in order to be used now in this moment. And as you can see, the way Europe works, the European Union works, especially in an area of health, it's quite complicated, because, as you know better than me, health is not exactly a competence of entire competence of the European Union. So it is shared with member states, and it is difficult to coordinate. So the idea to give a better response in the future to this situation is something that we have to envisage and to tackle, I guess, as soon as possible. I have to say also that, apart from the emergency measures that we still have to take now in this moment, more funds to respond to the crisis, coordination on the supply of what is needed at the ground, masks, but also, for example, ingredients. This shocked me yesterday. I was made aware of the fact that a lot of Italian small companies that produce not only pharmaceuticals but also chemicals, substances for disinfection, for example, are lacking their suppliers. So because we don't have such primary ingredient in Italy, we don't produce it anymore. We are dependent for it from abroad, from other European countries and from abroad. And apparently now also the supplier of these ingredients are lacking, thus making a gain on another front, still in the area of sanitary and health area, a big problem. So this is a problem of internal market then as well, which has been disrupted in this moment. That's a reality, and that's a very bad signal of the rise of egoism, of national egoism across a lot of member states. Might be something natural in times like these, as we are not prepared at all to confront and to face these exceptional times. It might be a natural response. I don't know. I would have preferred to have a stronger Europe that really acts in time and really try to coordinate better to find solution to what we are facing. So therefore, I really believe that the petition is something important in this moment to file to the European Parliament, and the European Parliament is luckily going on, even with a lot of difficulties to work. There will be this plenary session on the 26th of March, where we will be voting even from a remote, so by using technologies instead of the physical presence, and this is really a unique kind of situation. But luckily we are going on, and we are keep on working and keep on eyeing on the European Commission and especially and also on the European Council, as in my opinion. But I also, just to have a more general comment on the future of Europe and the conference of the future of Europe, that was also one of the topic under discussion. I really hope that this moment will be effective and will be a moment to deliver real and concrete decisions and concrete action and concrete changes. Otherwise, we might really miss a big opportunity. Probably, I don't want to think about that, but probably the last opportunity we have in the European Union to really create our home, our united home, to really reflect on the mistakes of the past and try to learn from it, and try to include now in this new reform of the institution of the European Union what we really need. First and foremost, more participatory democracy tools, more voice to citizens, more power to the European Parliament, which has so far has not the initiative, the legislative initiative, and we have really to make it transparent, as it is not today. I always want to remind that the European Parliament works with a high degree of transparency in all the entire process, from the filing of the amendments, which are published, are translated in all the languages, all the discussions are online and in streaming, while on the contrary, big black hole is the European Council and the Council of the European Union in particular, where in its preparatory bodies, we don't have an idea of what is happening there. This is really undermining democracy at its basis, at its core, and it's really important to have done now treaty changes in order to fix these things and to really guarantee that our common house is really a house that is functional, effective, and address the real needs of European citizens. Otherwise, yes, I might be afraid that we will be losing this very big opportunity.
Thank you, Eleonora. I have a question for you, because one of the topics that came up in the session yesterday, which was more around the instruments available, the instruments to be invented or innovated. But there is also a sort of a catch-22 situation where basically, even if we submit the best petition ever, even if we have a consensus around it, first of all, there are some, let's call it, bureaucratic elements. So the timing between the moment where you submit a petition and when eventually gets considered by the Petty Commission, that's an element. And the other element is that best case scenario, what can come out of it is a resolution of the Parliament, maybe. But can you maybe give us some elements to understand how a citizen push can be picked up by the Parliament, and which are the effects on the ground for these? Because I think your perspective can inform better the decision that this council can come up with, and see where we can cooperate with the Parliament, where we need to be more pushy, and I think your perspective can inform the debate better.
Yeah, of course. Since I'm a member of the petition committee, I've been working there in the previous legislature and now also in this term, in this new term, I can advise you that the petition is a wonderful tool. First of all, it is a wonderful tool, and sometimes not really well known and not very much used across the European Union. Not many citizens are aware of this tool that really gives the opportunity to be present and actively and physically present the petition inside European Parliament, no matter if it is just one signature or thousands of signatures. Even only one single citizen can file a petition to the European Parliament and deserve the same attention to as the biggest ones. Of course, there's a matter of political attention also to attach to a single petition. Therefore, if it is signed by and supported by a lot of citizens, it is easier to have it on the agenda. Technically speaking, when you submit the petition, then the European Parliament needs a couple of months in order to register it, in order to register and to declare it admissible or not, as there is like an admissibility check at the beginning. And after these 2 months, the petition is then submitted to the European Commission, that can give a first formal reply to this petition in written. But it has happened many times also in the past that the formal and technical replies by the European Commission is not really ambitious, or really just check if there's violations of the actual legal framework of and actual directives of regulation, while on the contrary, the political will and the political activity of the European Parliament and European the petition committee, which is of course composed by the members of the European Parliament, give more a political sense and let's say view on the petition, and sometimes has completely reversed the replies given by the European Commission. What happened in concrete terms when the petition is ready to be discussed at the European Parliament, the petitioner is invited to present it. There is a first round of speakers, which is, of course, the petitioner, then the European Commission that basically reply and give in repeat its technical and formal first reply, and then after a tour de table of the European members of the European Parliament that are present to give more political assessment of the petition. What can happen there then? The members of the Petty Committee can suggest to have follow-up actions on each and every petition, and in some cases, taken for example the petition related to situation of violation of environmental legislation. In a specific case, the president of the petition committee may ask to and may propose to send letters to national authorities in order to take into account the petition and what the citizens have been denouncing. But in general terms, and when the issue is very big, there could be, yes, some resolutions proposed by and popping up from the European, from the petition committee that in the end reach the plenary level. And this is very important. It has happened quite a bunch of time in the previous legislature. It is not so that easy, but it is important to raise awareness among the members of the European Parliament, among the different political groups, in order to have them on board, both in the committee level, in order to support the request of having a resolution, for example, and then of course the work have to be transposed also at a bigger level when it comes to the plenary. When it comes to the plenary vote, possibly. This is quite not an easy and not really an easy and simple road to undertake, but it is possible, and I really believe that this is high time that we make these topics heard, and the petition committee is the right place where to start. I really support this idea, and in my opinion, it is really a road we have to undertake.
Thank you, Eleonora. I don't have other people signed up, but feel free to do it. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm getting notifications. Maybe whilst we just let these thoughts and information and feedback just stay there for 1 second, I just want to suggest, and I'm curious to know opinions about it, how the work that we have done for the past 6 or 7 hours, basically, could proceed. Lorenzo Mine was also mentioning as well. So I think we have an urgent matter, which is the petition, which now needs to take into account the numerous amount of feedback and inputs that we got so far. And some of them are very, very relevant. I think there is an element on the petition as it is, but also there is the whole topic of the rule of law and the respect of fundamental rights for minorities, etc., which I think should be considered if being part of the bigger petition, or maybe 2 lines of action. And I think for that it will be interesting. Maybe I already received some availabilities from some of the participants, but I think it would be good maybe to have a small working group that can review all the comments together with Lorenzo and create a new draft, an updated draft, with a goal to try to submit it in any case to the official platform of the Parliament before the plenary session. In any case, I think it's not a bad idea. And so maybe this working group could work on that, and we could reconvene for those of the participants who want, maybe on Tuesday to discuss this. It's always going to be online, of course, no choices at the moment, and also live streamed. The second element is the long-term proposals, and also in general the review of these notes that particularly Octavian is coordinating in the document, but all of us are contributing to that. There will be need to review all of that and see what we can filter out and how we can move forward. And then the third element is the idea of assemblies, formal, informal, from here to November. And I think this is the underlying topic. Of course, each one of these lines of action, it's kind of tied together, so it doesn't work in a vacuum. But it's important to have these lines. And I'm happy to hear feedback from the participants in the council, because I think it's important to have a shared action plan, ideas on how this first meeting of the Council of Participatory Democracy can become something like more structured. So I leave some time for other comments in the meantime, also on this line of action, etc. And I silent myself 1 second. Okay, we have a new speaker who joined. 1 sec. Oh, yes. In the meantime, if someone wants to talk, feel free to do it.
What is happening?
I have a lot of background noise. 1 second. Okay, we do have other 2 people who joined that I want to welcome. One is Karsten Berg from the ECI campaign, and we also have Beatrice Covassi, former head of the EU representation in Italy.
Hello.
Hello, hi Beatrice.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. I don't know if you want, how much you followed of the previous debate, but I think, and if you have seen the preliminary materials, but if you want to comment on what we're trying to do and from your perspective, that would be very useful. And I also asked the same question to Karsten Berg, who is the founder of the ECI campaign, which was the grassroots group that worked a lot on the implementation of the ECI, but also on other forms, of course, of participatory democracy. And I think both your perspectives can add value to the debate.
Well, thanks. I will start, and I'm sorry that I joined you. I was able to join you only now, so I have followed more. I mean, on the materials you sent beforehand of this initiative, which I believe is really timely and very much, you know, due at the moment. Because here, of course, at the risk of repeating things that have been saying already, we have a big crisis, but we have a huge opportunity. We have the opportunity finally to demonstrate that nationalist, sovereignist solutions to global challenges are completely delusional, do not, you know, pay off in terms of citizenship, but they do not also deliver in any way. And so we have a real opportunity to have different models of direct participation, democracy, and citizens' initiative being really pushed through to have a democratic reform of the union, but also to, you know, make up our minds. I mean, we have heard, especially in Italy, also when I was in office in my previous role as head of representation here, the usual complained, Europe is not doing enough, it's not delivering, or Europe is overburdening us on the other hand. And I think this is a great opportunity to make clear to ourselves and to the political world, of course, and the institutions, where do we need Europe, like in this coronavirus crisis. Well, clearly, we don't have Europe because we don't have competence, firstly and foremost, on health matters. And the result we have seen in these days, the lack of coordination, of a very delayed response, fragmented, etc. And we have now the possibility to say what we need to do different for the future, where we need to put more powers in a federal-like or sovereign-national style of organization, and also stop this kind of blaming game in terms of fake news and putting the blame on different levels of governance, which are not always responsible. What I see from my observatory here, I'm really concerned about communication. Communication to the citizens at the moment is quite fragmented. We have, apart from the political communication, which is of course exploited in different ways, but I'm talking about institutional communication here. We have the Commission, which is doing an effort, you have seen, and I'm sure you mentioned it already, but 2 days ago, there was a new website online where we can find most of the relevant information for the citizens about what is being done to tackle this crisis. But still, we have a lot of turf war going on with the Council, with the Presidency of the Council, with other institutions. So the risk is once more to have a kind of very fragmented emergency communication, which is not helpful to citizens. There would be a need for, in my view, for a single coordination point, also for emergency measures, like the proposal, which I saw also in your document of the European Civil Protection, which is fully fledged and fully enabled to tackle health crisis as well. So that we have a Canadair going, in other crisis scenarios, going and delivering aid. We can do it also rapidly in this kind of scenarios. But of course, for doing so, we need to have the possibility to make it meaningful for the member states and not to make it just, voluntary or on the basis of different national policies, in my view. And in terms of welfare as well, we have seen very huge disparities, but also simply the opportunities given to workers to telework from home, social protection rights. Women are paying or are likely to pay a higher price in this crisis than other parts of society because of the type of jobs they are into, the type of arrangements they are into, etc. So again, it is a strong opportunity, a strong indication, but we really need to have the right instruments in the future in order to be able to tackle such a crisis very rapidly in a transparent, efficient, and democratic way. So this is the terms of strong encouragement, strong, if you want, also support from my side. Also to any kind of initiatives you may want to keep rolling as participatory initiatives for citizens, because it is indeed one of those moments, as several commentators have pointed out, where either we go to a more united Europe, a more convincing European Union for the future, or we will go towards a greater fragmentation, and more intergovernmental decision-making, which has proved definitely not up to the challenges until now.
Thank you very much. Let me see if we have other comments. Okay, so we were waiting for Brando Benifei, the MEP. I tried to inform him that we are heading toward the end, so let's see if he can join. I would open our last round of comments, like quick ones. So I think the lines are pretty clear. I don't know if someone wants to add something on priorities and other elements. Otherwise, I try to summarize. Priorities could be defined as working on the petition to the parliament, first line with the rule of law element for an immediate action, like with a bit of a working group around that. Second line is preparing other initiatives to be worked on and sort of deployed in intermediate assemblies, and potentially having a second meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy around May, maybe in this form, in other forms, and the long-term goal of the Conference of the Future of Europe boost that Lorenzo Marsili suggested around November. I'd say these are the 3 lines we need to work on. Let's take this time that we have if you want to edit, correct, amend, add, modify. 2 minutes for reflection. Otherwise, I think we don't need to be online. We suggested we are online, but we don't need to be online until 1:15. So I need some silent moment to define things.
Brando just sent me a message that in a couple of minutes he will join the meeting, so we could wait for him.
Yeah.
And well, maybe I don't know, Lorenzo, if you have taken note of all possible amendments to the petition and try to make circulate an updated version as soon as possible.
Definitely, I took notes, and I think the best thing to do, as Virginia was saying partially, will be to have an action plan, and maybe have another meeting with a smaller meeting, of course, with the most interested people on this specific issue of the petition, and try to come up with a text which can be a synthesis for all of us. So the inputs are really a lot, but I think we can take those all those into account, and then we have to decide when we will see again, and when we will propose this petition. I would suggest in the first half of the next week.
Okay. Thank you, Lorenzo. I wanted to ask Eleonora Ebi if there are new rumors about the conference on the future of Europe, if there is already some discussion about the possibility of postponing it, or in beginning in a virtual form, or if it's too early to discuss this issue about.
Aspetta Eleonora che ha il microfono disattivato, te lo attivo. Non te lo posso attivare. Cosa è successo? Un attimo, 1 second. Okay. Now it works. No, again. Activate it again. Okay.
Sorry, my screen was freezed. I don't know what happened. I couldn't push on the microphone. Well, actually, I don't have any real update so far. on this. I don't know if it will be postponed. It would be a very bad signal. I do hope that there will be possibly the use of alternative ways to organize it, even using the web technologies. But so far I cannot really answer to you, as really in these last days all the debates and the discussions were more related on how to continue to work, if continue to work, and how. So the time frame of the conference on the future of Europe is still quite unclear to me. Maybe Brando, that will join us in a while, have some more updated information, as he's also head of delegation for the Democrat Party, so he might be in this time in a better position to have fresh information than I.
Thank you, Eleonora. I noted down that Pier Virgilio D'Astoli, who knows everything, has some updates as well on the conference on the future of Europe. So let's hear the perspective of the European movement and Pier Virgilio D'Astoli.
Yeah, so as you know, the conference could start only if there is an agreement between the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament. So as you know, there is a position of the Parliament adopted the 15th of January. There is a position of the Commission adopted the 22nd of January, but there is no position of the Council, because the Croatian presidency submitted to the Coreper a paper. The Coreper had no agreement on this text, and then after the coronavirus emergency, the Coreper didn't discuss about this text. There is no agreement about the composition of the conference, the mandate of the conference, the governance of the conference, and the outcome of the conference. So I think that if the emergency will not end, it's very probable that the conference will not start. As I said yesterday, if you see the priorities of the German presidency, unfortunately the European conference is not inserted in the priorities. So it's sure that the conference will not start the 9th of May. And then we have to see if the Council, the Commission, the Parliament will reach a common agreement on these 4 points: composition, mandate, governance, and outcome. And for the moment, as we know, within the Council there is different positions between the governments about the outcome and the mandate of the conference. So for the moment, I think that there is no chance that the conference will start in the next weeks or even before summer. So we can follow it, but for the moment the situation is very confused concerning the start of the European Conference on the future of Europe. It's an unidentified flying object, the conference.
Thank you, Virgilio. I think what you just said confirmed probably also to keep the line of analysis and following action that Lorenzo Marsili suggested of a sort of self-convocated sort of conference. Like needs to be elaborated, the idea, but I think this can open up this line of group action and coordination. In the meantime, in the chat, we have Nicola R. That is pointing out.
Brando has arrived.
Okay, Brando, welcome.
Ciao, Brando.
So I just summarized a few things.
I just want to say I can wait and listen.
Thank you. Just 2 minutes to wrap up this bit of information. Sorry. So there is a comment in the chat around an open call for innovation ideas from the startup in Europe. Nicola is going to talk about it in a few minutes. And then we have another intervention about the petition from not Tommaso Campanella, but I don't remember your real name, sorry. But I will leave the floor to Brando Benifei, who is the other MEP who accepted the invite to join. just for reference, we invited all the MEPs to the Council on Participatory Democracy, so potentially we could have had others as well. So Brando, thanks for joining. I guess you might have followed some of the work remotely, or you have seen the materials that we shared beforehand.
Yeah. Yes.
I asked you the same question that I asked to Eleonora Evi, which is the situation of the European Parliament in the management of the coronavirus, but also like your perspective on how to foster the collaboration between participatory democracy initiatives and make it complementary to the representative democracy, and whatever you want to add. The floor is yours.
Yes. First of all, thanks for organizing this meeting. I think we will need more about this, because the topic you work on will be more and more important. I think that what we are seeing happening now will influence also future trends and organization of our democracy, and the balance between representative and participatory democracy, direct democracy, etc. So I think the reflection will need to be continued because of the changes that this probably prolonged isolation period of people in their homes will provoke, and also simply looking at the European Parliament and the national parliaments, how the parliaments are going now to change. I'm a bit worried, to be honest, because we are not technologically organized to sustain a parliament at the moment that is not able to discuss normally. We will have a plenary next week on Thursday, where a few MEPs that are in Brussels, I stayed some more time, so I will be there physically at the plenary. I will speak, but only a few of us will be there, and all of us will vote electronically, but in a way that has been organized very, very quickly to react to the situation, but not at all a permanent setting. And things are being discussed on how we organize for the votes, but also for the discussion, because we are a parliament, so we need to discuss. And it's not easy, to be honest. I've been doing in these days a lot of calls like this, and for me at least, it's fatiguing, because in person I'm ready and able to do my job as an elected politician, already second time in the parliament. I know how to do, but for a full day of meetings like this, I feel I'm not fully, even myself, prepared. And everyone will experience, I think, change more and more in a way. The work is being done at all levels, including those of us involved in democratic institutions in various ways, and also movements. I think we will see some changes happening. We already see them, and we need to think how to react, because we risk, I think, I'm not very optimistic at the moment, we risk not a communitarian response, a unity of individuals, of how we can think of it. I think we risk a lot of closure, of closing down in families, in closed communities. I'm a bit pessimistic compared to many optimistic views I'm reading now about a new civic engagement coming from this experience. I have at the moment more pessimism, but we need to react to that. I need also, I mean, myself, I will try to do my part. Next week with the parliament, we will start working with the committees with the written procedures, but we are thinking of organizing similar meetings like this one with the committee of the European Parliament, the committees, sorry, and we are having a lot of discussions also on the substance. I've heard the last part of I think it was Pier Virgilio D'Astoli. I recognize the voice from the previous intervention. He touched upon some points. on the substance, and you also put in the document that is the basis of this discussion, for example, a clear indication on the health competence. I think we need to be vocal on this with people, because many people are saying why we are not seeing the European Commission imposing health guidelines and provisions at the European level. Why it took so much time to have more uniformity, which is not even fully achieved. And I think we need to be very clear on that, because as you know, there is a growing Euroscepticism linked to some delayed response, it's true, and also some errors. I think Lagarde didn't do her job very well last week, and now we have seen the ECB changing course in these last 48 hours, luckily. We will see a debate on Eurobonds, a debate on the use of the ESM, but we also need to be more on the roots of the issue, because I've heard Pier Vigilio saying about the conference on the future of Europe. Well, that's in fact an approach that is completely trampled by the events. We need to have the governments put clearly on the how do you say in English, the seat of the accused people, because we need people to understand that there is an enemy today of the capability of Europe to respond quickly in time. It's the national governments, because at the moment, what I see is, to be very brutal, ECB is buying now a lot of titles. So the member states will think that they have space okay for action, and we have seen it also from our government side in Italy. We have been doing a big decree. There will be more, with a lot of money being spent. And also the suspension of the Stability and Growth Pact goes in the same direction, giving the member states the freedom to spend. But do we think this is the sustainable way forward in time? I think it's not. I think we must be clear that if Europe just let us spend as much as we can, in a few months, I think we will need to use the ESM, the so-called fund for saving states, no? The one that in Italy is the big debate on the mess. We will need to use it in the way Greece has been using it, with the memorandum procedures, etc. Because the truth is that if we don't have a stronger communitarian reaction, and what we will do next week as Parliament will not be sufficient. Next week we will free 37 billion euros from the structural funds. It will be around immediately it will be 3 billion for Italy, and a bit more again for Italy in the next months. But that will not be sufficient. It will not be sufficient, and we cannot have countries like Italy just increasing their debt and consider the fact that with lower growth our debt GDP relation will worsen. We cannot, because that's the kind of, what I'm saying now is the kind of debate we hear from some of the so-called sovereignist nationalists. They say we don't need to talk about the ESM because we risk to get into the Greece situation. But this is a fake contraposition. We can avoid this way if we go in the direction, I tell you to look at that if you didn't, at the direct direction that the Econ Committee of the European Parliament has indicated, with a new strange but interesting majority of EPP, Liberals, Greens, and the SD, saying that we need to use the money that is there of the ESM. It can mobilize hundreds of billions if we use it in a good way. Also, it can be used as a basis for the Eurobonds. The Econ Committee of the European Parliament, never been particularly progressive on new uses of financial instruments, has been clear in saying that we need to renew these instruments. But, and I conclude, that will not be sufficient again. We need to look at how the European Union works as a whole, and this is the occasion, this is the political space to launch a I use that word, we can interpret it in many ways, a federalist initiative for the European Union, because we need to connect the frustration, the anger of people, which is everywhere. I was talking with a colleague from France a few hours ago on a video call like this, and the situation against the growing anti-Europe sentiment is the same in France, growing like in Italy. I could give you many examples of this. We need to react to that with a clear proposal that is answering the anger of people. I think we can go on in this direction, and what you have proposed also in terms of working more on ways to engage people are extremely relevant. So I'm available to continue working on this together. As I said, I think that also in the experience of the parliament that is trying to very quickly and I mean with flaws and problems changing its way of working even in these days, we will need to discuss and find how we reorganize our institutions, because they are not prepared for this, but they will need to be prepared quickly. Otherwise, we will just surrender to probably more authoritarianism, and I'm convinced that no one here wants that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brando. I think, sorry, Virginia, that in a way, even if you did not follow the whole debate, it was a good summary of the debate, because you blended together the short-term emergency warning to a long-term vision. It is exactly the effort that we have been trying to do during these 2 days, putting together a lot of elements, the element of science, medicine, and cooperation on measure on health, but also the warning about the rule of law emergency measure, in particular for the weakest, poor people, homeless, migrants, asylum seekers, and so on, or even the situation in prison. And at the same time, well, of course, the economic situation, but also try to use this crisis or to seize the dramatic opportunity of this crisis to relaunch a federalist vision for the European Union. So now we will, in the next hours, we will discuss about a text of a petition to address the European Parliament, but not just for the sake of, but with the idea of trying to mobilize European public opinion as such, in order not to have just a national response. And it is not only a problem of government, it is also a problem of public opinion. We need a European arena. I hope that there will be a true debate for the next plenary session of the European Parliament. We were discussing this also with Eleonora Evi, because this will be the first and true European democratic public arena. So it's very important that would be, of course, broadcast on the website and would be publicized as the first opportunity of having a real European debate, because ministers have met, but they have met in secret teleconferences. They are meeting every day, but secret meetings about it is completely, we are not allowed to know what opinion were. So the occasion of next week is very, very important, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Brando, a lot. We have the last 3 people that sign up to talk, and I really want them to have the space for doing that, and then we conclude briefly. So we have Nicola L on the startup and innovation element and technology. Of course, we didn't tackle that a lot today, but there is another layer of reflection which justify the need of longer term proposals around digital platforms disinformation, but also the fact that now we are all using more messaging solutions. One of the topics that was mentioned at the beginning by Marco Cappato was the interoperability of digital platforms and unlocking the data and the use of data and stuff like that. And I think this is an underlying element that goes in between the emergency, the rule of law, the right of citizens to their privacy and stuff like that. So I think, as I said, we didn't talk about it, but the innovation and technology element is very important. So we have Nicola R on that. We do have Michele Fiorillo on the petition and Beatrice Covassi again on the innovation topic, and then we stop. So Nicola. You're probably mute, Nicola.
I'm here. I can speak a lot because I'm working from. I want to read what I write before. We commission finance 164 million of euro to startup that have innovative information or technology or something else to for the find coronavirus COVID-19. But what is the problem? The problem that is they closed the call yesterday at 5 o'clock p.m. And for me is not a good idea because I find that that proposal only 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and how many people find that before me or after me, and how many people can have it? How many people have idea that can explain or can use for this startup, and how they can possibility to take money, make a startup for helping the finding and the solution of the COVID-19. I don't know. Now it's impossible this financial because the call is closed, and this for me is not a good idea. No, what do you think about? That is only for make an input for all people that are here and to ask they how that do this kind of financial. Why is closed? The COVID-19 is not confirmed. Is really here now, and for me it's not good idea to close only for do that, for say that, because COVID need all idea that we have, and if you don't have money, have the good idea now, you can put your startup in help for all in Europe or all in the world. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nicola. We got Michele Fiorillo on the petition, and then Beatrice Covassi, and then we go for the conclusion.
Yes, buongiorno a tutti. The petition, I read the petition, I think is very good. It's a good advanced compromise, and I wanted to maybe suggest that also we underline also in the global instrument, also maybe the possibility also at that level to experimentate instrument of civic engagement somehow. I mean, it's much more ambitious than to have this type of engagement at the European level, but there are NGOs that are already trying to go in that direction. There is this Civicus NGO, and there is a campaign going on, which I'm part of. We elaborated this idea of a World Citizen Initiative on the model of the European Citizen Initiative. And I think that maybe in the petition we could also mention this. So the need for a citizen of the world, and maybe in that moment they will start more than ever to perceive to be part of of the same people somehow try to to experiment form of civic engagement, civic deliberation through the online instruments. This World Citizen Initiative is the idea that if you collect to be decided, but a lot of signatures in each part of the world, you can push a proposition to the Security Council even, and of course to the to the General Assembly of the United Nations. But I put some link here in the document that maybe you can look at it better to consider it. Yes, just to conclude, I fully support the idea to organize a counter conference of the future of Europe. Something that we were also thinking to organize with DN25 and other organization. I think maybe the whole thing could be made all together. And this idea that we were debating also yesterday, especially Virgilio was stressing on it, of the European Parliament, especially in this moment, turning itself in a constituent assembly. And I don't know if Brando is still here, but would be interesting also to hear his opinion, maybe also in the next year. Yeah, because I think really now, Brando, we know each other since a long time, and also because of the Federalist meetings, really, as you said, is really the moment now. Also because, as you stress, we have the risk that of democracy under threat, and if you don't have a jump towards a sort of a federalist republican form of Europe, we risk to lose the project of Europe in itself. And as MPs, maybe you have the responsibility to push this historical turn somehow. But thanks everyone to hear and to organize.
Thanks, Michele. We have. Thanks, Michele. I give the word to Beatrice, and then I don't know, since Brando was called on this, you want to add something, and then we really close. So, or Eleonora, I don't know if someone wants to, the two MEPs here want to say something about this feedback. Beatrice Covassi, eventual replies from the MEPs,
Okay.
and then we close.
Thanks. Hi again. I don't know if it's only voice, I guess, and not video. One word on the call, because it was mentioned by Nicola. This call that you find on the research and innovation page of the Commission is not, it closes today. So the closing time was postponed to 5 p.m. today. It is different from normal calls because this was a fast track call for startups and PMIs who would have already ready to deploy kind of innovations but could be used for coronavirus. So it does not replace, the possibility of having further calls later on. This is something, a point I wanted to make just to be clear about why this call was fast-tracked and done in a kind of a unusually quick modality with 1 week publication only. Said this, I wanted to just to put on the table quick considerations about what it means going digital. And Brando and the others who intervened also on this online vote of the Parliament already mentioned the challenges of having this online parliamentary kind of democracy. Of course, we need to reflect on the tools. We need to reflect on the tools also for citizens, for participatory democracy online. But we need also to think about, other aspects. For instance, one important aspect is network capacity. Now that we are all online, it was a challenge also for the European Commission we are all in telework since Monday. So it was a big challenge to have all these people teleworking all together. And in fact, the system at the beginning did not cope. And as you have seen, there have been lately initiatives, autonomous initiatives by Netflix, by Google, to try and reduce and make sure that, reduce the need for network capacity and make sure that the experience online is still valuable for customers and for people who are connecting. But this clearly is a challenge that will be increasingly a challenge for the future. So capacity, resilience, and of course, in social terms, who is online? You know, who has the equipment? Where do we get internet? What do we do with people who cannot connect and who are still, you know, especially in Italy, I'm thinking, you know, there's a digital penetration which is really low in some areas, in some regions. Linked to this is, of course, the need to strengthen European cyber resilience, because in a time of crisis such as this one, there is a clear increased risk of having cyber attacks. You know, someone who wants to put on its knees even more economies and societies can think about, you know, cyber attacks at a moment like this, where we only work basically online, and that would be a catastrophe. And final thought that I wanted to put on the table for reflection, and I think also Brando hinted at it at some point, it's really the fact that in this kind of circumstances, there is a risk of exacerbation of what is the dichotomy, or the, you know, the choice between privacy versus security. We have seen also in Italy now all these debates sparkling about tracking people with their phones, with their cell phones, to see if they're moving, if they stay at home, etc. Just to make one example. But it's clear that privacy and security at times of crisis and at digital times is a very important issue related to democracy and to our democratic rights and participation, that in my view needs a special attention. And I think it would be useful to have maybe a collective reflection also on this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. I don't know if Brando or Elona want to quickly pick up on the last comment by Michele. Otherwise, I think we're good to close.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that I think there is some movement and some appetite inside the European Parliament to take a bolder initiative. To be honest, you know very well that there is a big geographical issue, so that there are, regardless of the political groups, the large majority of colleagues from some countries are very cold on considering the stronger integration and the federative federation perspective to be the solution. But in fact, in these days, colleagues from Eastern Europe and from Northern and Scandinavian Europe, which is often much more the issue than the Eastern Europe. However, we don't talk much about that, I think. They look like they had an epiphany in the discussions with me. They realized that they are not going to cope if we don't evolve our institutional system of the EU. How it is today, it's not working. It was already clear it was not working on migration, on human rights guarantee, on rule of law, on fighting against transnational tax evasion. We can go on. Now the emergency has revealed, I think, more and more clearly this situation, and I see a little more courage. So I hope that we can all of us be more proactive in this sense, and go on, and don't be scared about the governments, because the truth is that we have today in the governments those who can be allies if they want, but they can be the worst enemies of what we are proposing. And because Marco has just mentioned quickly, but it's a very important aspect, the meetings that are not transparent. This is the culture of the Council. The Eurogroup is based on on what they tell us about the discussion, but it's not really transparent. And this is the culture of the council. I see it in everywhere. I've learned it by being an MEP. It's also because the council, the institutional framework of today, as this legislative body that is not really a legislative body, is more based on diplomatic consensus and practices, which are very different from the democratic ways we are expecting. So in this contradiction, I think we can start to build something else. On this, I'm more optimistic that there is movement in the parliament, and in the next weeks things can move. I'm convinced of that.
Thank you, Brando. We have Nicola for one answer to reply to Beatrice, and then we close.
Hi to all. Beatrice, sorry, but you say that the call is open. I'm going in the link that I have sent, and the call is closed. And the other problem is that why? I know that there is for a very fast PMI, very fast close for PMI that have now a know-how to help for the coronavirus. But if someone have the idea, the good idea for all, why close it? Why? Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nicola. I think this is an open debate, could go on forever why it was closed or open. So I leave Nicola and Beatrice to discuss it eventually in the chat, or we will follow up on other ways. Okay, so I don't know if Marco, Lorenzo, Hervé, some of the ECIT, some of the organization that called this first meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy want to say some conclusive comments?
No, I don't. Just to thank everybody.
Cool. Okay, so I do the honor of the goodbye. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining with such a level of attention, and the numbers were pretty stable during the entire meeting, which means that we all followed carefully what's been discussed. I will send a wrap-up email in the next hours, but you already have all the links of the documents that have been produced, discussed, amended. I want to thank all of us, and it's been a collective effort, so there is no need to name specific people, but we really did a great first meeting of this Council on Participatory Democracy. The goal now is to pick up on the elements that are on the table that should be carried on, and let's not wait ages because there is no time. So I already asked for some availabilities for the working documents, for the review, and just to start to move together and make this not an isolated moment. Thanks everyone, and you have all the references, so let's be in contact if there are any additional ideas. And thanks also for the other co-callers for this first Council on Participatory Democracy, because it was important to have a bit of a critical mass to start this. I wish you a happy weekend. Bye, cheers.
Bye bye.
Thank you, bye bye.
Ciao a tutti.
Bye bye.
Ciao ciao, ciao a tutti.
Bye.
Ciao, grazie, ciao ciao.
Ciao a tutti.
Ciao.
Grazie. Ciao.
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 Bye bye.
Bye guys, thank you.